Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Sleepy Time Cafe, the perfect place to relax, unwind, and drift into sleep. My name is Ariana, and I am the host of the podcast. Today has been good. We're kind of batch recording some episodes, and I'm having lots of fun. My room smells great. It smells like beautiful incense. I have my blueberry tea with me, which is delicious. Okay, before we get into the reading, I just want to remind you that you deserve relaxation and you deserve rest. No matter what happened today, no matter what's happening tomorrow, no matter what your future looks like, in this moment, you are safe and you deserve to be relaxed. I just want you to take a moment and just really feel a hug. Feel your adult self hugging your inner child and just making yourself feel warm and cozy, whether that's physically or mentally. Just for the briefest moment, even if it's for half of a second, just take that one tiny moment to let yourself feel safe and cared for. Okay. If you weren't able to conjure up those feelings, that's totally fine. There is never any pressure for you to feel a certain way at any moment. We're going to be reading Snow White and Rose Red. I don't know if this is like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or it is different. There once was a poor widow who lived alone in her hut with her two children who were called Snow White and Rose Red because they were like flowers which bloomed on two rose bushes which grew before the cottage. These two children were as good, happy, industrious, and amiable as any in the world. Only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red would run and jump about the meadows, seeking flowers and catching butterflies, while Snow White sat at home, helping her mother to keep the house or reading to her if there was nothing else to do. The two children loved each other so dearly that they always walked hand in hand when they went out together. And when Snow White said, "We will never separate from each other," Rose Red replied, "Not so long as we live." And their mother said, "What each girl has, she must share with the other." Often they ran deep into the forest and gathered wild berries, but no beast ever harmed them. For the hare would eat cabbage leaves out of their hands, the fawn grazed by their sides, the goats frisked about at them in play, and the birds sat perched on the boughs, singing as if nobody were near. No accident ever befell them, and if they stayed late in the forest and night came upon them, they used to lie down on the moss and sleep until morning. And because their mother knew they would do so, she felt no concern about them. Once when they had passed the night in the forest, the dawn of morning awoke them. Then they saw a beautiful child dressed in shining white dress sitting near their couch. The child rose up and looked at them kindly, but without saying anything went into the forest. And when the children looked around, they saw they had slept close to the edge of a pit, into which they would have certainly fallen if they had walked a couple steps further in the dark. Their mother told them that the figure that they had seen was doubtless the good angel who watches over children. Snow White and Rose Red kept to their mother's cottage so clean that it was a pleasure to look in it. Every morning in the summertime, Rose Red would put her house in order and lay a wreath of flowers at her mother's bed before she woke up, in which she was always placed a bud from each rose tree. Every winter in the morning, Snow White would light the fire and put the kettle on to boil. And although the kettle was made of copper, it shone like gold because it was polished so well. In the evening, when the flakes of snow were falling, the mother would say, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door." And then they would sit at the hearth, and the mother would put on her spectacles and read out of a great book, while the two girls sat spinning. By their side lay a little lamb, and on a perch behind them a white dove sat with its head under a wing. One evening when they were sitting comfortably together, there came a knock at the door as if someone wished to come in. "Make haste, Rose Red," cried her mother. "Make haste and open the door. Perhaps there is some traveler outside who needs shelter." So Rose Red went and drew the bolt and opened the door, thinking it was some poor man outside. But instead a great bear poked his head in. Rose Red cried out and ran back. The little lamb bleated, the dove fluttered on her perch, and Snow White hid herself behind the mother's bed. The bear, however, began to speak and said, "Do not be afraid, I will do you no harm. I am half frozen, and my only wish is to come in and warm myself." "Poor bear," cried the mother, "come in and lie down by the fire, but take care you do not burn your coat." Then she continued, "Come here, Rose Red and Snow White, the bear will not harm you, he means well." So they both came back, and at last the lamb, the dove, came near, and they were no longer afraid of him. "Come here, children," said the bear as he entered. "Come and knock the snow off of my coat." So they brought the broom and swept him clean. Then he stretched himself before the fire and growled cheerfully, and in a little while the children became friendly enough to play tricks with their unwieldy guest. They tugged at his long, shaggy hair, put their feet against his back, and rolled him about, and even ventured to hit him with a hazel stick, laughing when he grumbled. The bear bore all their play in good temper, and only when they hit too hard he cried out, "Leave me with my life, you children, Snow White and Rose Red, or you will never wed." When bedtime came and the others had gone to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You may sleep here by the hearth if you like, and then you'll be safe from the cold and the bad weather." As soon as the day came, the two children let the bear out again, and he trotted away in the snow, and every evening afterwards he came back at a certain hour. He would lie down at the hearth and allow the children to play with him as much as they liked, and at last they became so used to him that the door was left unbolted until their friend arrived. But as soon as spring returned and everything was outdoors again, the bear said to Snow White one morning, "Now I must leave, and I cannot return during the whole summer." "Where are you going then, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the evil dwarfs. In the winter, when the ground is hard, they are obliged to keep in their holes and cannot break through. But now, since the sun has thawed the earth and warmed it, the dwarfs break through and steal all they can find. And what has once passed into their hands and is hidden by them in their caves is not easily brought to light." Snow White, however, was very sad at the departure of the bear, and opened the door so slowly that when he hurried through it, he left behind on the latch a piece of his hairy coat. And through the hole which was made in his coat, Snow White thought she saw a glittering of gold, but she was not quite certain about it. The bear, however, ran hastily away and was soon hidden behind the trees. Soon afterwards, the mother sent the children into the woods to gather sticks. While doing so, they came to a tree lying across the path, and near its trunk something was bobbing up and down in the grass, and they could not imagine what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old wrinkled face and a snow-white beard a yard long. The end of the beard was caught up in a split of the tree, and the little man kept jumping about like a dog tied to a chain, for he did not know how to free himself. He glared into the maidens with a fiery red eye and cried, "Why do you stand here? Are you going to pass by without offering me any help?" "What have you done, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You foolish goose," cried the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree in order to get a little wood for my kitchen. The food which we get is soon burnt up with great logs. We don't swallow down so much as you greedy people devour." I had just driven the wedge in properly, and everything was going well, but the wretched wedge was too smooth and it flew out, and the tree closed up so suddenly that I could not draw out my beautiful white beard. So here it sticks, and I cannot get away. Don't laugh there, you silly creatures. How horrid are you?" The children tried as hard as they could to pull the dwarf's beard out, but it was caught too tightly. "I will run and get you some help," cried Rose. At length, "Oh, you crack-brained sheep's head," snarled the dwarf. "What are you going to call other people for? You are too many for me now. Can't you think of anything better?" "Don't be impatient," replied Snow White. "I have thought of something," and pulling her scissors out from her pocket, she cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf found himself at liberty, he snatched up his sack, which laid filled with gold between the roots of the tree, and throwing it over his shoulder, he marched off, grumbling to himself, "Stupid people, to cut off a piece of my beautiful beard, bad luck to you." Away he went without once even looking at the children. Some time afterward, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch some fish, and as they came near the pond, they saw something like a great grasshopper hopping about on the bank, as if they were going to jump into the water. They ran up and recognized the dwarf. "What are you doing?" asked Rose Red. "You will fall into the water." "I'm not quite such a simpleton as that," replied the dwarf. "But don't you see this fish is trying to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unfortunately the wind had entangled his beard with the fishing line, and so when a great fish bit the bait, the weak little fellow was not able to draw it out, and the fish had the upper hand. The dwarf held on to the reeds and rushes, which grew near, but to no purpose, for the fish pulled him where it liked, and he would soon have been drawn into the pond. Luckily, just then, 2 maidens arrived and tried to release the beard of the dwarf from the fishing line, but they were too closely entangled, so the maiden pulled out her scissors again and cut off another piece of the beard. When the dwarf saw this done, he cried out in a great rage, "You donkey! Do you want to disfigure my face? Was it not enough to cut off the end of my beard? Now you have to take away the best part of my fine beard? I dare not show myself again now to my own people. I wish you had run the soles off your boots before you had come here." So saying, he took up a bag of pearls which lay among the rushes, and without speaking another word, slipped off and disappeared behind a stone. Not many days after this adventure, it chanced that the mother sent 2 maidens to the town next door to buy thread, needles, pins, laces, and ribbon. Their road led across a field where great pieces of rock lay strewn about. Just over their heads they saw a great bird flying round and round. Every now and then it dropped lower and lower until at last it flew down behind a rock. Then they heard a piercing shriek, and running up they saw with fright that the eagle had caught their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was trying to carry him off. The gentle children at once laid tight hold of this little man and held him fast till the bird gave up the struggle and flew off. As soon, then, as the dwarf had recovered from his fright, he cried out in a shrill voice, "Could you have not held me more gently? You pulled at my fine brown coat so hard that it's torn and full of holes. What meddling rubbish you are!" With these words, he shouldered a bag filled with precious stones and slipped away to his cave among the rocks. The maidens were now used to his ingratitude, and so they walked on to the town and completed their errand. On the way home, they crossed the same field and again came suddenly upon the dwarf, who had emptied his bag of the precious stones near a clean place, thinking that nobody was near. The sun shone on the bright stones, which glittered with so many colors that the 2 maidens stood still to admire them. "What are you standing there gaping for?" asked the dwarf, and his face grew as red as copper with rage. He continued to abuse the poor maidens till a loud growling noise was heard, and a great bear came lumbering out of the forest. The dwarf jumped up, terrified, but he could not reach his cave before the bear overtook him. Then, terror-stricken, he cried out, "Spare me, my dear Lord Bear. I will give you all my treasures. See these beautiful precious stones which lie here. Only give me my life. What have you to fear from a weak little fellow like me? You would not even feel me with your big teeth. Here, take these 2 wicked girls. They would make for a nice morsel. They're as fat as a young quail. For heaven's sake, eat them." The bear, however, did not take the trouble to speak, but gave the wicked dwarf a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The maidens were going to run away, but the bear called after them, "Snow White and Rose Red, fear not. Wait, and I will go with you." They recognized his voice and stopped, and when the bear came up to them, his rough coat suddenly fell off, and there stood a tall man, dressed entirely in gold. "I am the king's son," he said, and was condemned by the wicked dwarf who stole all my treasures to wander about in the forest in the form of a bear until his death freed me. Now he has got his well-deserved punishment." Then they went home, and Snow White was married to the prince, and Rose Red to his brother, with whom they shared the immense treasure which the dwarf had collected. The old mother also lived happily many years with her 2 children, and the rose trees which had stood before the cottage were now planted before the palace, and every year they bore beautiful red and white roses. The end.